everybody. It is Tuesday, September 3rd. You're listening to the Mo News podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu. New month, short work week, Jill.
Moshe, $1 for every time someone said, "Can you believe it's September?" And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, how was your holiday weekend?
A nice weekend, Moshe. A lot of family time. And my daughter started school already, but for a lot of people here on Long Island, school starts today or Wednesday. So here on the island, a lot of back to school prep. And how about you guys?
It was really nice. We're still in the middle parts of, we've moved out of our previous place. We're going to be moving into our new place next week. So a sort of influx. But sort of in flux, but loving this period of time. As I've said about other periods of time, Olivia is approaching 1 year old this month. Actually, she's going to turn 1. So, watching her discover new things, say hi to every animal. We went to a petting zoo over the weekend, hi to all the strangers. And it's so funny. I now notice just how many people, including myself, of course, are on their phone because Olivia will be in my arm and she'll wave at everyone who passes by, not realizing that they're buried in their phones. And you do see how rare it is for people to be looking up. So then they notice that this cute little baby saying hello to them, waving at them. And then their reactions. But, she'll kind of look at me. I don't think she realizes that when she says hi to people, why they're not saying hi back is.
It is pretty sad, right? We've become this society that's just staring at devices. And I'd like to say that not me, I'm above it, but I am a terrible offender as well.
Well, it took my 1-year-old waving at everyone around to realize, wait, why aren't you saying hi back to my daughter? Oh, all you people are buried in your phones. Oh my God, I'm like that too. How many children have tried to say hello to me in the past?
All right, Moshe, the lesson is less time on your phone and more time in real life. IRL.
In real life, embracing, looking around and smelling the flowers.
I did walk this weekend, as we were talking about, at quote unquote God's pace, as Carlos Whitaker had mentioned, kind of like a regular walk, no headphones.
3 miles per hour, Godspeed.
Yes.
Godspeed is what he calls it.
That's right. I'm sorry. And I did really notice the birds, nature. It was a different experience. I was kind of like, oh my God, I could be listening to a podcast right now, but I appreciated the idea of it.
So if you didn't listen to what we were reading on Friday's podcast, Carlos Whitaker, friend of the pod, has a new book out called Reconnected. He spent 7 weeks disconnected, no smartphone, no technology. And among the lessons he learned was have time, have solitude. You realize some things. It's creative. You have great ideas. So take a moment, disconnect when you're on a walk, ride, etc. No music, no podcast, just take it all in. And it really is fulfilling. If you want to listen to that podcast, it's still available only to premium listeners over on the Mo News Premium podcast, mo.news/premium to join.
All right, let's get to the headlines. We start in the Middle East, where most of the 6 hostages murdered by Hamas just days ago have been laid to rest. What happens now as thousands of Israelis take to the streets to protest, demanding that Benjamin Netanyahu do more to reach a ceasefire hostage deal?
Yeah, we'll talk about the reaction in Israel, the largest protest in nearly 2 years there, as well as the reaction here in Washington since one of those hostages was an American.
Also here in the United States, Aurora, Colorado in the national spotlight after allegations that a Venezuelan gang has taken over multiple apartment buildings in the city.
What local authorities are saying, what the police are saying, what the governor is saying, what former President Trump is saying, and you might not be surprised to learn they all have different takes on this.
The U.S. has seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's plane. In business news, ESPN and Disney go dark for millions of DirecTV customers amid a contract dispute. Just as many were watching the U.S. Open and other big sports events. On that note, we have a U.S. Open Roundup. And to the Paralympics happening in Paris, Armless archer, as he's called, Matt Stutzman, wins a gold medal for Team USA.
So many incredible stories coming out of the Paralympics. We talked about this over on the premium Instagram over the weekend. The Stutzman story, you don't want to miss it.
Somehow, Moshe, over 100 years later, the Titanic keeps making news. The railings on the boat's iconic bow have broken off and fallen to the sea floor.
Who would have thunk it? The Titanic falling apart 100 years later, bottom of the sea.
I think the bigger question is, how did they stay on this whole time?
Well, he was the king of the world.
And Moshe has on this day in history.
Jill, your clue today, a comb, a brush, and a bowl full of mush.
And a quiet old lady whispering hush.
You got it. For those who don't, stay tuned for On This Day in History.
Okay, we are going to begin with the discovery of 6 hostages murdered in the tunnels under Gaza by Hamas. One of those was 23-year-old American Hersh Goldberg-Polin. The Israeli Defense Forces identified the 6, all of whom were taken hostage in the October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks. They included Polin, Carmel Gat, Alexander Lobanov, Almog Saruzi, and Ori Danino. They range in age from 23 to 40 years old. 5 of them were abducted from the Nova Music Festival on October 7th, the other in a nearby village. Hamas reportedly killed all 6 just hours before Israeli forces reached them. The bodies were found abandoned in Hamas tunnels under the Gaza city of Rafah. Goldberg-Polin was laid to rest Monday. He was among those taken during the attack on the Supernova Music Festival. He lost his arm in a grenade blast. His parents, Rachel and John, have been visible and outspoken advocates for bringing all of the hostages home. They wore tape on their shirts with the number of days that their son was being held in captivity. Ultimately, he was held for 320 days. They met with the UN Secretary General, the Pope, and President Biden, among other world leaders, pleading for help to get him released. And that included an impassioned plea last month for his release at the Democratic National Convention. Thousands attended his funeral Monday in Jerusalem for a very emotional ceremony. And here is a bit of his mother Rachel's eulogy. And a warning, this is very emotional. But take a listen.
We didn't think of it. I beg your forgiveness. We tried so very hard, so deeply and desperately. I'm sorry. Now, my Hersh, I ask for your help as we transform our hope into grief in this new unknown brand of pain. I beg of you, Hersh, please do what you can to have your light shine down on me, Dada, Libby, and Orly. Help shower us with healing and resilience. Help us to rise again. I know it will take a long time, but please, may God bless us that one day, one fine day, Dada, Libby, Orly, and I will hear laughter, and we'll turn around and see it's us, and that we're okay. You will always be with us as a force of love and vitality. You will become our superpower. But we're going to now need continued help to get through this sickening new chapter, too.
And Moshe, regardless of your religion, of your politics, it is hard to listen to Rachel and what she had to say and not tear up or actually weep with her.
Anytime a parent has to bury a child, it's just heartbreaking and tragic. And both Rachel and John were so outspoken. Said they tried to do everything. And anyway, every time I try to watch a bit of it over the last day, it brings me to tears because it's just raw, their feelings, and it's something no parent should have to go through.
One day after the Israeli army recovered the bodies in Gaza, hundreds of thousands of protesters took to the streets in Tel Aviv on Sunday to demand that the Israeli government do more to negotiate a deal to bring the remaining hostages home. Nearly 500,000 Israelis, about 5% of the small country's population, took to the streets. Now, for perspective, that would be about the equivalent of 20 million Americans protesting. Now, where do things stand in terms of the hostages at this point? The Israeli government estimates that of the original 250 hostages taken by Hamas last October, there are still over 100 hostages that are still being held in Gaza, and about 2/3 are believed to be alive. Just over 30 are believed to be dead. Since October 7th, just over 100 were released during a temporary ceasefire last November. 8 were rescued alive over the last year. Hamas is holding all of the 100 hostages and bodies as leverage in hopes of exchanging them for Hamas leaders and other prisoners that are being held in Israeli prisons as part of a deal. 7 U.S. nationals are still being held by Hamas, including 4 that are still believed to be alive and 3 that are presumed dead. President Biden and Vice President Harris got a briefing in the Situation Room on Monday on the latest. Biden released a statement after speaking with the Goldberg-Polin family saying, "I am devastated and outraged. Hamas leaders will pay for these crimes." He added, "I have gotten to know his parents, Hersh's parents, John and Rachel. They have been courageous, wise, and steadfast, even as they have endured the unimaginable." Biden told reporters he was, quote, "very close to presenting a final hostage deal proposal by the end of the week." What appears would be a take it or leave it offer. Asked by reporters if Benjamin Netanyahu is doing enough, Biden said no. A spokesperson later clarified that Hamas needs to do more as well.
Yeah, so a lot of questions as far as what the U.S. is going to do here, given that it's pretty clear here that Hamas murdered an American. A reminder, Hersh was born in the Bay Area before moving to Israel as a child with his family. And that comes as there were already more than 36 Americans killed on October 7th and in the aftermath of the attacks. As far as those ceasefire talks, you talked about Biden saying he's close to a final deal here. This has been ongoing for 6 months. Hamas is looking for the Israelis to withdraw from Gaza completely, end the war. A major sticking point right now is control over the Gaza-Egypt border. It's about a 9-mile border there, now under Israeli military control. The Israelis finally in there for the first time in 20 years since relinquishing control of Gaza back in 2005, discovering dozens and dozens and dozens of tunnels that ran underneath Gaza and Egypt, some so wide that they could drive through there. It was a huge source of human smuggling, weapon smuggling, and the Israeli government right now is split on next steps. Having now control of that border for the first time in years, Netanyahu and other leaders believe they have to maintain control of that border. They cannot trust Egypt. They cannot trust Hamas, or frankly, any future government in Gaza to control that border. The issue is there's another side of the debate in Israel saying, do everything you can to get out the remaining living hostages now, especially in light of the fact that we've learned that these 6 hostages were alive, that they had survived 300 plus days underground there. And so some Israeli ministers are saying, including the defense minister of Israel, saying, give up control of the border, make a deal right now with Hamas, and we'll figure out the border later. We'll figure out another way to deal with this and prevent tunnels or blow up tunnels or whatever. Netanyahu is adamant, though, saying, no, we finally have control of this. And there's a lot of people in the cabinet who back him up. And by the way, it's a real debate happening now in Israel. Jill, you mentioned it's the largest protest in 2 years, 500,000 people taking to the streets this weekend. 5% of the country saying make a deal. Thousands of primary schools, several cities, transport networks, the airport for a couple hours, hospitals all slowed or suspended operations on Monday as a number of people protested not going to work as an expression of anti-government dissent. Still, Israelis are split when you look at public polling. And it comes down again to that crossing and long-term security for the country, the prevention of the next October 7th. And that's the feeling among those who say keep control of the border. Then you have Israelis who say, no, we got to get these hostages home, make a deal, even if it means giving up control there. The feeling among the Israelis is there's no way Europe, the U.S., anybody will let Israel take control back of that border. And so the feeling is it's now or never to keep control. Remember, when we're talking about Gaza here, the whole area is 6 miles by 25 miles. It's about the size of the city of Denver or Philadelphia. But ultimately here, the Israelis were not able to prevent that massive attack. More than 100 holes were cut in the fence. Several thousand Palestinian Hamas members and other Palestinians came across the border that day. And they feel like they really have to ratchet up security moving forward, even if it comes at the expense of the hostages here. Now, Netanyahu gave a press conference yesterday. He brushed aside allies. He brushed aside pleas from some allies, chants from Israeli protesters, demanding an immediate ceasefire. He says, what message would that now send to Hamas after they murdered those 6 hostages within hours of us getting there? That suddenly you slay hostages and you'll get concessions, he asked. He said, when it comes to Hamas, they can forget about it when it comes to control of that border ever again. When asked how he would define the end of the war, now reaching about 11 months by the end of this week, he says when Hamas no longer rules Gaza, despite killing upwards of 15,000 members of Hamas so far, Jill, it appears Hamas still maintains control there of parts of Gaza, and that remains an issue for Netanyahu and parts of the Israeli government.
And Moshe, just a quick follow. You mentioned this tension between Netanyahu and the defense minister. And one analysis that I was listening to was saying that part of that also that needs to be taken into consideration is their roles. And Netanyahu is the one who has to deal with the diplomacy of this all. So yes, from a military perspective, the argument that the defense minister is making is, look, it's more just get out of that border area between Egypt and Gaza, get these hostages back, make a deal. We could always go back in. Netanyahu saying it's not so easy. I'm the one who's going to be under this crazy pressure from the United States, from the UK, from the UN, not to do it. So once we leave, we're never going to be able to go back.
Yeah, and at the same time, you got Hamas saying, get out of here or you're not going to get anybody.
In a statement, the spokesman for the military wing of Hamas says that following Israel's successful hostage rescue in June, some new protocols were given to terrorists guarding the remaining hostages that they should kill them if Israeli troops were approaching. Hamas spokesperson Abu Abeida adding that Netanyahu's insistence on liberating the prisoners through military pressure instead of concluding a deal will mean that they'll return to their families inside coffins and that their families will have to choose whether they are dead or alive. Notable, Hamas first claimed that it was Israeli airstrikes that killed the hostages. Then they claimed that it was Israeli soldiers on the ground before ultimately putting out a statement implying that they did it. And then in the ultimate psychological warfare, even put out videos of the hostages kind of making their final goodbyes and statements. Heartbreaking. Yeah,
that have not been covered widely by a number of media for obvious reasons in terms of psychological toll on top of these families already learning that their loved ones had died. It's one of the reasons, by the way, we follow the Hamas Telegram channel, and they'll often go through 4, 5, 6 reasons sometimes, excuses, claims about every single act. So always be very skeptical of the first or even second statements Hamas puts out when it comes to various actions.
Time now for the speed read from CBS News, Colorado. The city of Aurora, Colorado, has been in the national spotlight in the last week due to reports of a Venezuelan gang taking over an apartment building after a video showing a group of armed men inside of an apartment complex went viral. The video circulating on social media shows a group of men trying to break into an apartment unit 2 Sundays ago. They are believed to be members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. They're also known as TDA. And this has led to a back and forth now between a member of the local city council, the city's Republican mayor, the Democratic governor, the local police, and now former President Trump. There are accusations that several apartment complexes were under gang control, and some residents were even being forced to pay rent to the gang. The Aurora Police Department shared a video Friday saying they found no evidence of that. In the video, they are going door to door, engaging with residents at an apartment complex called The Edge. It is one of several buildings at the center of concerns regarding alleged activity by this TDA gang. The interim Aurora Police Chief, Heather Morris, said in a police video that while members of the gang are known to operate in the area, officers found no evidence of a gang takeover of the building. She said, quote, "There is definitely a different picture. I am not saying that there is not gang members that don't live in this community, but we're learning out here is that gang members have not taken over this complex."
Still, the mayor of Aurora, Mike Hoffman, said the city is seeking an emergency court order to shut down apartment buildings that he claims have been overrun by the gang, declaring them a criminal nuisance. He said apartments seeing gang activity are all under the same ownership. They have multiple code violations, criminal activity, and a bunch of issues preceding the migrant crisis. So other issues here historically in these buildings. Jill, we shared a number of videos on Friday on the Instagram account. Local media have been interviewing locals, including some residents, or I should say former residents, who have left the building out of fear about these gangs. A local city council woman actually helped one woman move out who was living in fear. The mayor there, Mayor Kaufman, a Republican, saying the town is victim of failed Biden administration policy on the border. We should note Colorado has been the epicenter for a number of migrants coming into the U.S. Denver's a city of about 700,000 residents. It neighbors Aurora. Denver actually leads the nation in migrant arrivals per capita. More than 40,000 migrants have arrived over the last 2.5 years. It actually is second only to New York in terms of total number of foreigners that have arrived over the past couple of years. And the situation is now spilling into Aurora. They're saying there that the influx is straining the city's budget, crowding schools, hospitals, and swelling the ranks of the homeless population. And now, of course, the video here, that the allegations here that gang members are overtaking apartment complexes. Denver has spent more than $70 million to provide them with aid, has cut back on emergency services. Meanwhile, neighboring Aurora has passed a resolution saying they're not going to provide any services to migrants coming into their city. And this has now become a national issue on the campaign trail. You saw former President Trump talking about it in Pennsylvania, actually, late last week, using it to attack Biden immigration policy, saying the gang is controlling the town there. Again, the mayor says that's not happening. The police say that's not happening, but there are allegations of their control over an apartment complex here. But of course, you just mentioned the police say they didn't see that. Then I got some pushback over the weekend from others online who say, well, do you think local residents, because they fear the gangs, are going to actually tell the truth to the police? So there's a lot we're trying to read between the lines here to get at to what is actually happening. It appears, again, there's 3 apartment complexes at the center of this. Residents and some people saying there is gang control. The police now coming in there saying there is no gang control. The governor chiming in here, Jared Polis, he's a Democrat, saying that the mayor and others are using their imagination by saying there's control here. And the governor says, listen, I am willing to support you with state troopers and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation if you need it. That hasn't been requested here. At the end of the day, you're probably going to be hearing more about the situation in Aurora here as we talk about, we always talk about the border, but ultimately a lot of these migrants come into various parts of the U.S. and they're in Aurora right now in Denver. They're seeing the impact of that. And local officials will say the vast majority of these people, peaceful, trying to work, trying to contribute. But ultimately here you have what is a very violent gang known in Venezuela that appears to have gotten some members in through the border and are impacting people in suburban Denver.
Speaking of Venezuela, from Fox News, the United States seized a plane owned by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro in the Dominican Republic. Homeland Security flew Maduro's personal plane back to the United States Monday morning when it landed in Fort Lauderdale after determining that he violated sanctions in order to purchase the plane. Described by officials as Maduro's version of Air Force One, it's used for his state visits around the world. It was seized in the Dominican Republic after it was purchased through a straw company in violation of sanctions laws and export controls. The seizure came amid continuing pressure on Maduro at home and abroad over a fraudulent July 28th election that he claims to have won, while the opposition said that its vote tallies show its candidate soundly defeated him. The U.S. and dozens of other countries agree that this election was fraudulent. More than a month later, Maduro still hasn't released the vote tallies to prove his alleged victory.
Yeah, so Maduro, his associates, the oil sector, all already under heavy U.S. sanctions, but clearly this is a move by the U.S. to try to ratchet up pressure on him. Remember that it wasn't long ago, we reported on this podcast last year, that the U.S. was trying carrots, not sticks with Maduro, saying, hey, are you open to holding a free and fair election? We're going to lower sanctions on the oil sector and other aspects of the economy. He said, sure, yeah, I'm totally game for that. By the spring, it was very evident that Maduro had no plans for a free and fair election, arrested his opponent. And so the U.S. has been ratcheting pressure up since then. You then had this election unfold in July, and he refuses to release the vote tallies, refuses to relinquish control. The only people supporting him are basically the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and a few other regimes around the world. The North Koreans, I'll add, are also supporting him. And so the U.S., an official telling CNN, this sends a message all the way to the top. Seizing a foreign head of state's plane is unheard of for criminal matters. We're sending a clear message here that no one is above the law. For years, they've been disrupting the flow of money, billions of dollars to the regime here. That hasn't worked. They've been seizing luxury assets. That hasn't worked. Now they've seized his plane. We'll see if this has any effect on Maduro.
From CBS News, ESPN, Disney, ABC stations, and streaming services like Hulu went dark for millions of DirecTV customers on Sunday, with the networks pulled by network parent Walt Disney Company over a contract dispute. The services were pulled on a busy night for sports events, with the new college football season kicking off its first full weekend and ESPN airing the U.S. Open tennis tournament. Fourth-round matches were underway at the U.S. Open when ESPN's broadcast went off the air on DirecTV at 7:20 p.m. Eastern Time, angering many viewers who vented their displeasure on social media. The blackout also happened during a big weekend, again, for college football. DirecTV is a provider of satellite TV, internet, and streaming services. They've got about 11 million customers, making it the nation's third largest pay TV provider. So what is this fight all about? It centers on the fees that DirecTV pays Disney to broadcast its programming.
Yeah, the way it works in TV is the cable providers, the satellite providers pay the networks or these conglomerates like Disney money to carry their stations. And Disney or Paramount or Comcast will charge a fee. They'll say, listen, we're going to charge you $5 to carry ESPN, $4 to carry ABC, $3 to carry ABC Family, and so on and so forth. Now, what DirecTV is looking for here is like, hey, can you offer us some smaller bundles? Like, nobody really cares about some of your smaller cable channels anymore. And Disney says, oh, no, you will take it all and you will pay us a lot. And what you have right now is a major business issue about the future of TV, because you have Disney looking for more money. They want more money for their channels because their ratings are dropping. More people are cutting the cord. And so advertisers are spending less on advertising. So Disney needs more money. At the same time, DirecTV and these other cable and satellite providers, well, they're seeing cord cutting going left and right. So they have less money to pay for these channels. See the problem here? Disney wants more money. DirecTV has less money. They want more optionality. Disney wants them to carry everything. And this is, again, is the same thing with all the larger networks out there. So you have DirecTV saying that Disney is taking an anti-consumer approach. We want a new deal. We want smaller bundles and options for our consumers who don't want hundreds of channels anymore. And Disney says, no. We are providing them with everything. They need all this stuff. So this has led to numerous blackouts through the years. Now you have a Disney DirecTV standoff. What is the reasonable price that DirecTV will pay for ESPN and ABC and Hulu and the streaming bundle? And by the way, on top of that, you have Disney and these companies saying, and we want you to also offer all the streaming options. And so then DirecTV is like, well, why would we offer that? That competes directly with what we're offering people. So this is the bottom line, is sort of everyone is trying to get the last cent, the last dollar out of the existing cable satellite world. And so you have this re-up, you have all these deals coming up here, because nobody knows in 4 or 5 years when these deals are up, what is left of cable and satellite and where streaming is.
And Moshe, of course, they do it at a time when they know that viewers want to watch the content.
Yeah, like a big time for sports in the fall. So, when they think they have leverage, that's when they pull the plug. Yeah,
we'll do it during the fourth set of the U.S. Open match.
And by the way, then you don't win with any consumer. So is that a win for DirecTV? Is that a win? Is that a loss for Disney? I think everyone's a loser in that case.
That's when everybody's just like, okay, YouTube TV it is. Speaking of the U.S. Open, some headlines on the women's side. Coco Gauff's U.S. Open title defense ended in a 3-set loss to fellow American Emma Navarro in the 4th round on Sunday. The reigning women's champ becoming just the latest big name to make an early exit at Flushing Meadows this year. Gauff had been looking to avenge her 4th round loss at this year's Wimbledon. She is ranked, or was at least ranked before this tournament, 3rd in the world. She fought her way back into the match after going a set down, but ultimately she double faulted 19 times and she made 60 unforced errors, leading to her loss. And there's another story making the rounds, especially on social media. Kazakhstan's Yulia Putintseva has apologized for her, quote, terrible behavior towards a ball girl at the U.S. Open. So this happened during her 3rd round match, or her 3rd round defeat to Italian Jasmine Paolina. Footage showed the ball girl throwing 2 tennis balls towards Putintseva ahead of her next serve, only for the player to ignore them and basically have this stare down back at the girl without moving at all her body. And it left this young ball girl in this really uncomfortable and awkward position before eventually Putintseva caught the 3rd ball and the match resumed. She was down 4-2 in the 2nd set. The crowd at first was kind of shocked and then just started to boo the player. And later in a message on social media, she wrote that she wanted to apologize to the ball girl. She said, honestly speaking, it wasn't about her. I was really pissed at myself for not winning the game from the break point, and then got empty with my emotions and deep in my thoughts that I wasn't even focusing on what's going on and who gives me the ball. I don't know, Moshe. A lot of people on social media saying just unacceptable. Leave these poor ball girls and boys, I don't know, Moshe. A lot of people on social media not buying it.
It gets intense there. over there on the court, Jill. Over on the men's side from the AP, 2024 will go in the books as the first season since 2002, 22 years without a slam title for any member of the so-called Big Three. Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, all not there. So we're going to see a new name potentially win here. Federer, of course, is retired. And Djokovic was playing but lost in the third round of the tournament. So we're seeing some newish names. American tennis right now is having a bit of a moment with a lot of new or newish names on the scene. We're seeing a few Americans advance to the quarterfinals now. American Taylor Fritz and Frances Tiafoe advanced to the final 8 on day 7, as has Jessica Pegula on the women's side.
Moshe, I have to say, as a huge tennis fan myself, it's been really exciting to see these new American names doing really well. Yeah, it's great. And some records at the Paralympics. This from NBC News. American Matt Stutzman winning gold on Sunday and setting a new record with 149 out of 150 possible points in para archery. Stutzman was born without arms and learned to do everything with his feet. He said he couldn't get a job. Employers wouldn't hire him because of his disability. And then in 2010, he was watching archery on television and decided that that is how he would make money because, quote, a bow does not care who shoots it.
Jill, it's so incredible to watch Stutzman shoot with his feet. He pinches his bow between two toes on his right foot and then pushes his leg out to draw the bow. It's so steady. He actually, in one of the final rounds over the weekend, hit it perfectly in the center. Like, people had never seen this before. You know, he got in the 10 circle, in that like little circle in the middle, but it was literally in the middle, a perfect shot. In fact, he scored a 149 out of 150, as you mentioned, a new record for para archery. He's actually like, I think I have an advantage because I don't have arms over the regular archers. And so he goes from 2010 watching on TV being like, maybe I can do that without arms, to qualifying for the Paralympics in London, winning the silver. He won a bronze. He now finishes with the gold. He says he's done. He did it in front of his 3 sons over the weekend. He said, that was really remarkable for him. And he's like, I'm good here. Like, I figured it out. I learned it from scratch. I've won the gold. And he's broken a number of records. Back in 2015, he hit a target from 310 yards. And so he broke the world record for the farthest accurate archery shot with a bow of any athlete with any ability. What's remarkable here is he's inspired other folks to take up archery without arms. They believe by 2028, the Paralympics in LA, there'll be 8 of them competing. Again, he says he's done here. We'll see if he comes back, but just still very cool. Over on the women's side, by the way, there was a British archer who was born without one of her hands. And not only did she medal over the weekend, her name is Jodie Grim, by the way. She was 7 months pregnant. So she was doing interviews where she's like, I'm talking to my baby in my belly, being like, I need you to stay calm. Because remember, you're an archer, so you're pulling back the thing. And the last thing she needs is like a kick or a move at 7 months. So she's like, Mommy will be with you later. We'll give you cuddles later. We really need you to just chill and be quiet for a moment while we try to win a medal. And she pulled off. She was born without a hand, and she's 7 months pregnant, and she won a bronze medal.
So if you need any motivation to get out and do something, there it is.
There it is. I mean, many of us look at TV or watch something, we're like, I could do that. Well, they actually did. They watched it on TV. They're like, I could do that.
The Paralympics are really incredible, and I'm glad that they finally seem to be getting the coverage that they deserve. And finally, from the Daily Beast, a section of the iconic bow of the Titanic, made famous on screen by Jack and Rose in James Cameron's legendary film, has succumbed to the effects of slow decay, according to some new images. Sitting at the bottom of the North Atlantic, the loss of a large section of railing was noted in images from a new expedition to the wreck, highlighting just how much the ship is changing after sinking more than 100 years ago in April of 1912, taking 1,500 people with it. The 15-foot section of portside railing was discovered on the seafloor by underwater robots this summer. An official with the most recent expedition notes that the bow of the Titanic is just iconic, and that is what you think of when you think of the shipwreck. And it doesn't look like that anymore. It is just another reminder of the deterioration that is happening every day.
Yeah, so in case you were wondering if we're still going down to the Titanic, the answer is yes. Apparently in this expedition, Jill, they took 2 million photos to learn more because we can't get enough. We cannot get enough of the Titanic.
What are they still learning? I mean, I'm not trying to poo-poo this, but like...
We love the Titanic. Humanity
is
obsessed
an
with
iceberg.
Titanic.
Like, what is...
It happened like 110 plus years ago. They took 2 million... Well, don't worry, because if they took 2 million more photos, because we needed them. And we're going to keep going, okay? People are going to keep going. It's a thing. It's believed that this section of the bow fell off sometime in the last 2 years because, rust, and it's the bottom of the ocean, and there you go. So they're hoping to preserve the legacy here because we need to know more. We can't get enough.
Are there any unanswered questions? I mean, haven't we figured out what happened?
Okay, if you're a Titanic file who listens to this podcast, send us a message and they'll be like, yeah, Jill, we have these 22 unanswered questions about the Titanic. Okay. And that's what we need to get to the bottom of by visiting it repeatedly at the bottom of the ocean. All right. Speaking of history, we always do On This Day in History here, Monday through Thursday here on the podcast. We're going to begin 251 years ago today, September 3rd, 1783. The Treaty of Paris on this day in 1783 is signed between the Americans and the Brits. Nearly 2 years had passed since the surrender of British General Cornwallis in Yorktown that had ended the fighting. They negotiated the deal. This was effectively Great Britain, King George recognizing American independence, agreeing on the borders of the new nation. Though the Brits would try again 30 years later, the War of 1812, but they would lose that. And at that point, America was good to go on its own. Staying with American history, on this day in 1838, Frederick Douglass successfully makes his escape from slavery to freedom. The abolitionist, journalist, author, human rights advocate made his dramatic escape from slavery, traveling north by train and boat from Baltimore through Delaware to Philadelphia. That same night, he takes a train to New York, where he arrives the following morning. He was about 20 or 21 years old. We don't know exactly. He was born in 1817. He did celebrate his birthday on February 14th on Valentine's Day because he remembered as a kid getting a heart-shaped cake. And so he decided to celebrate his birthday on February 14th. He was the son of a black mother, unidentified white father. He had gotten a secret education from people he had worked for as a slave. They actually went against the law to educate him. So he makes this valiant escape to the north. He actually gets married a couple weeks later and then writes a book a couple years later because they said, there's no way you were a slave. You were way too educated. And he wanted to prove that he was, in fact, a slave. And so he writes this book a couple years later to refute those allegations and becomes this major abolitionist in American history. All right. The answer to the clue, if you didn't know it earlier, though you probably knew it. On this day in 1947, Goodnight Moon was written by Margaret Wise Brown. First published for the first time. Jill, I think it's a pretty ubiquitous book at this point.
Moshe, I can't even tell you how many times I have read it in my life. I know every word by heart. But there is a method to the madness in terms of just like the style, the writing. There's a reason it is a classic.
Yeah, it was interesting. Apparently, children's books, until Margaret Wise Brown writes this, were classic fairy tales, fantasy, and she wanted to bring children into the world that they might actually know, bring reality to them in children's books, and that was what was so remarkable about that book. All right, fast forward to the 21st century. On this day in 2002, pour one out for Napster. It rose quickly, it fell quickly. And on this day, Napster officially shut down with a message on its website that read, Napster was here with a gravestone.
Thank you, Napster, for crashing my computer the day that I had to hand in my final at Columbia University. So thank you.
Crashing my computer, giving me lots of viruses as I attempted to download music, and then freaking me out circa 2000, 2001 when the federal government was starting to arrest people for illegally downloading music. And being like, oh my God, am I going to go to the jail for this version of Jay-Z's?
For making like Hot 97 mix,
right,
Club Mix 2000.
For downloading Now This Is Music, like 27. Am I going to go to jail for this, Napster? Well, it turns out I didn't. I think some people definitely went to trial. Anyway, sticking with music news, turning 41 years old today, Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics reaches number 1 on the Billboard charts on this day in 1983. 1 year later, 2 new songs come out on this day. They're now 40 years old. Cyndi Lauper's All Through the Night and Sade's Smooth Operator. Smooth Operator.
So what you guys don't hear sometimes is Moshe having to correct me on pronouncers with like complicated Middle Eastern names, things like that.
Yeah.
And me sometimes correcting him on how to pronounce musical groups. Sade.
Yeah. Like you only hear the final version. You don't hear the like, hey, did you get that wrong? So admission here, I called her Sade, and you're like, she's Sade, Moshe. And I'm like, you're right, Jill.
And for the record, I mispronounced about 15 things that Moshe corrected during this podcast. So
yes,
we're more than even.
I would actually say, I would say I'm up on, on this podcast.
Yes.
Should we talk about the Titanic story? No, I'll let that one go.
Thank you. Sometimes I do think you're going to be like, Jill. How old are you?
Have you covered stuff? Like, do you live in this world? How have you not used that word yet? You're in your 40s.
Moshe, I'm not a voter, okay? Just accept it.
No, you're right. You clearly, I would never let you captain a boat based on your pronunciation of various words about the water.
Okay, everybody. One day we will release outtakes to this podcast.
Outtakes of everything we mispronounce on a daily basis. Actually, we're not, Jill, because they'll never listen to us again. They'll be like, how can we trust these two people?
All right, everybody. On that note, thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
And you don't miss a mispronunciation, any of it. You guys are great. I hope you had a good weekend. Friday will be here sooner than you know it.
All right. Bye, everyone.